The bell rang sharp at 8 a.m., slicing through the thick morning fog that clung to the cracked windows of room 214 like ghosts from yesterday's drama. Autumn wind howled through the hallway vents as students shuffled in with half-zipped hoodies, the smell of cafeteria pancakes still lingering on their breath. At Jefferson Middle School, the Monday blues didn't just whisper, they screamed. In this quiet chaos, Amara Lewis walked into the classroom like a shadow, quiet, composed, unseen. She was always the quiet one, always at the back of the room, head down, hoodie up. Her hoodie, soft, oversized, ash gray, was almost a shield, one she wore like armor. No one paid much attention to Amara, except when they wanted something to laugh at. Mrs. Pendleton, the English teacher with a tight bun and tighter heart, was already halfway through a rant about personal essays when Amara found her seat. The assignment had been simple. Write about someone who inspires you. Most kids chose the obvious. Mom, dad, a celebrity, a friend. Simple, safe. But Amara, she had submitted something different, something bold. The projector clicked to life, casting a blue haze over the dry erase board as Mrs. Pendleton pulled up the next essay in the queue. And now, she said with a voice as dry as the chalk in her tray, we have a particularly imaginative entry. A few students leaned in. When Mrs. Pendleton smirked, the class followed her lead like obedient hyenas. Amara didn't flinch. She just stared ahead, a stillness in her eyes that would have made anyone with a sharper intuition uneasy. But no one noticed. Not yet. My father, the man who could break the sky. Mrs. Pendleton read aloud. By Amara Lewis, intriguing title. Let's see who this superhero dad is, shall we? She cleared her throat dramatically and began to read. As long as I've known my father, she read, I've seen him split bricks with his hands, move with silence and strength through the forest, and never once raise his voice, even when everyone else was screaming. He taught me discipline, how to hold my balance on broken ground, and how to breathe through fear. Mrs. Pendleton paused and looked over her glasses. Very poetic, Miss Lewis. Who is this mysterious man of legend? Amara's voice came quiet but clear from the back of the room. Chuck Norris. The silence broke like glass. Then laughter. It started with a chuckle from Jackson Bell, the class clown who had never met a joke he didn't steal. Then Emma burst into a loud guffaw, clutching her stomach, and like dominoes the rest of the class followed. Even Mrs. Pendleton chuckled, a condescending, cutting sound that hung in the air like the stench of cruelty. Chuck Norris, she repeated, a mocking grin on her face. Are we submitting satire now? No, Amara replied, her voice unwavering. He's my dad. The class erupted again, but this time there was venom behind the laughter. Sarcasm, disbelief, even anger. Because how dare a quiet black girl from the East Side claim a name so iconic, so untouchable, so white in their minds? Mrs. Pendleton raised a hand to hush the room, but the smirk never left her lips. Now, Amara, I think we all enjoy a little fantasy, but this class is about truth, authenticity, and unless you've got a birth certificate signed by the man himself, I do. The room quieted. Even Jackson stopped mid-laugh. Amara reached into her backpack, not with a flourish, not for effect, just calm, slow, practiced. She pulled out a folder, old and slightly torn at the edges. From it, she slid a page protected by a thin plastic sleeve. The class craned their necks as Mrs. Pendleton walked over and took the document with raised eyebrows. And there it was, the name, Carlos Ray Chuck Norris, listed as father. A buzz went through the room like static. But Pendleton wasn't done. This could be fake, she said, eyes narrowing. Anyone can print something like this off the internet these days. Amara didn't speak. She didn't move. Her hands rested in her lap, perfectly still. But her eyes, they burned. Not with embarrassment or fear, with patience. As if she'd seen this kind of ignorance before. As if she was waiting. Pendleton threw the paper back on Amara's desk like it was trash. Sit down, she snapped. We'll be discussing plagiarism and truth in storytelling tomorrow. It was over. The laughter didn't return, but the whispers did. Snickers, the occasional side-eye. Amara stared ahead, silent, but something inside her shifted, not broken, tightened. Ready outside, the wind howled louder, and inside, the door to room 214 creaked open. No one looked at first. They were too busy trying to reabsorb the awkward tension, too distracted by the performance that had just played out. But then they felt it, that presence, heavy, focused, like walking into a room where someone has been training their whole life for a single moment. Heads turned slowly, mouths parted. "I'm Chuck Norris," he said. Silence, and then chaos. And the silence in room 214 was unlike anything the students had ever experienced. It wasn't the awkward hush after someone says something weird, or the kind of forced quiet that teachers demanded after a lecture. This silence was sacred, heavy, like the air in a dojo right before a black belt demonstration. Chuck Norris had walked into their classroom, not the myth, not the meme, the man. And more than that, Amara's father. For a few long seconds, the world itself seemed to tilt. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before the viral videos, the headlines, or the fallout that would soon reshape everything, at Jefferson Middle, there was only Amara, and a life far different from what anyone imagined. The cabin was remote, hidden among a ring of pines so dense that the sunlight had to fight its way through. It wasn't glamorous, but it was sacred ground. Inside, the walls were lined with books about philosophy, martial arts, ancient texts, and military history. The kitchen was minimalist. The air smelled of cedar, cinnamon tea, and something hard to define, like old secrets and gunpowder. A 6-year-old Amara stood on the porch barefoot, her tiny feet hardened from years of walking over cold stone. She wore a gray hoodie, one that had belonged to her mother before she passed, a woman Chuck never spoke of but never forgot. Amara's fists were wrapped in linen, knuckles bruised from training. She wasn't crying. She never did after a bad fall. Not once. Chuck watched from a few feet away, arms crossed, breathing slow and silent. "What do we do when we fall?" he asked. Amara clenched her jaw. "We breathe and we rise." He nodded once. Again, she ran at the wooden post, the same one she had failed to strike cleanly a dozen times that morning. This time she landed the blow. Her wrist screamed, but she didn't. Her stance held. She breathed. Chuck allowed himself the smallest of smiles. Amara had grown up in two worlds, one private, one invisible. To everyone else, she was just another girl. Brown skin, quiet mouth, hoodie always drawn over her tight curls. But at home, she was being raised like a warrior. Every morning began at 5 a.m. with meditation, then body training, then books. Always books. Chuck believed discipline meant nothing without wisdom. She read Sun Tzu before she learned multiplication. She knew the difference between fear and caution by age 8. By 10, she could catch a rock in midair, thrown from behind. But no one at school ever saw that Amara. She'd changed towns 5 times before 7th grade. Chuck never stayed in one place too long. He never said why. Maybe it was old enemies. Maybe he didn't trust the world anymore. Maybe grief chased him like shadows. Or maybe, Amara thought, he just didn't want her to grow up under someone else's name. The older she got, the more she began to see his burden. He was a legend to the world, sure. But legends don't make good dads unless they know when to take the mask off. Chuck did his best. He didn't teach her how to blend into society. Not really. He taught her how to stand still in the storm, to wait, to choose her moment. That's why Amara never bragged, never raised her hand, never mentioned who her dad was. She didn't need to. She had nothing to prove, until Mrs. Pendleton called her a liar, until they laughed 2 weeks before the incident. "Do you ever miss it?" Amara asked as she sat across from her dad at the kitchen table. He was sharpening a knife, not because he needed to, but because he needed something to keep his hands busy when emotions got close. "Miss what?" "Being known." He paused. The scraping stopped. The fire crackled. "I'm still known," he said. "Just not where it matters." Amara nodded, stirring her tea. She wanted to ask more, but she knew better. Instead, she asked something different. "Why don't people believe things that don't fit their picture?" Chuck looked at her then, not with confusion, but with the kind of knowing gaze only a man who's lived through wars, fame, and loss can give, because truth is a heavy thing, he said, and most people haven't trained to carry it. That stuck with her. The night before Chuck stepped into room 214, Amara had sat quietly in her room while the wind howled outside their modest house on the edge of town. She could hear her dad in the garage hitting the bag. He didn't train like other people. It wasn't for fitness. It was meditation, a reminder. Each strike was measured, like punctuation marks in a sentence only he could read. She pulled her hoodie tight around her shoulders and looked at the picture of her mom, one of the few they kept framed. "Wish you were here," she whispered. Her mother had met Chuck during a humanitarian mission overseas. She was a doctor. He was in private security. At least that's what she called it. They'd fallen in love fast, lived hard, and made Amara. Her mother died of cancer when Amara was 3. Chuck had never remarried. He couldn't. His heart was still married to a ghost. The video leaked within 12 hours. It started with a blurry phone clip, shaky hands, muffled gasps. The unmistakable figure of Chuck Norris stepping into room 214 like a storm wrapped in denim and leather. A 15-second TikTok posted by Emma Jensen with the caption, "Yo, this girl's dad is actually Chuck Norris?" blew up faster than gossip in a middle school hallway. Within an hour, the comment section was a war zone of disbelief, memes, awe, and straight-up chaos. By the time the sun rose over Jefferson Middle the next morning, the world outside had changed. Amara didn't check her phone that morning, not out of fear, but focus. She brewed tea, tied her hoodie tighter, and walked with deliberate calm into the chaos waiting for her. At the school gates, local news vans lined up like predators on a safari. Cameras pointed, microphones waited. She passed a woman yelling, "Amara, can we get a statement?" and another trying to shove a mic in her face. A security guard rushed over, blocking them just enough for her to slide past the crowd and into the building. Inside, it was no better. Whispers followed her like shadows. Some kids stared with awe, some with resentment. Others looked confused, like they were still trying to figure out how someone like her, quiet, hoodie-clad, black, could be connected to a name they only ever saw in ironic memes and martial arts movies. But none of it touched her. She walked like her father taught her. Back straight, chin level, footsteps precise. She didn't flinch when they stared. She didn't smile when they whispered. She just kept walking. Room 214 was dead silent when she walked in. Mrs. Pendleton wasn't at her desk. A substitute teacher sat in her place, eyes glued to her laptop like it held the key to escaping this mess. "Good morning, class," the sub said flatly. "Mrs. Pendleton's on personal leave." No one said anything. They didn't have to. Everyone knew exactly why. Chuck sat at the kitchen table, sipping black coffee, eyes locked on the screen. A dozen tabs were open. News articles, tweets, threads. The internet had turned Amara into a headline overnight. Chuck Norris's secret daughter breaks the internet. Teacher mocks student for legendary claim. Instantly regrets it. "Is this the most badass father-daughter duo ever?" He closed the laptop slowly. He didn't care about the clout. What worried him wasn't the attention. It was the intention. Fame came with teeth. It bit, and Amara had stepped right into the jaws of it. He pulled out his old burner phone, dialed a number he hadn't used in years. A gruff voice answered on the second ring. "She's out in the open," Chuck said. "That's going to wake up a few ghosts. You want eyes on her?" "No," he replied. "I want eyes on everyone else, Amara," the substitute said gently, walking over to her desk as the bell rang. "The principal would like to see you." The class buzzed. Amara stood. Not in fear, but in readiness. She knew this would come. New people would try to shape her truth into something they could control. She followed the halls in silence, her sneakers brushing against tile floors that suddenly felt louder than usual. Every step echoed like a countdown. When she entered the principal's office, there was someone else waiting, a woman in a sleek blazer, her nails painted crimson, a badge that read, "District Communications Director, Amara," she said, smiling with eyes that didn't smile. "We'd like to talk to you about your story." What no one at Jefferson knew, not yet, was that the viral attention had triggered something far darker. A man named Wexler sat in a bunker-like room with 6 monitors. He watched the classroom clip again and again, his face scarred, his fingers twitching with old rage. "Chuck Norris," he growled. "And a daughter." He clicked a button. A face popped up on screen. Blurry footage of Amara walking into school. "She's the key," he muttered. "And he just gave her to us." He turned to a wall of photos, newspaper clippings, old CIA files, mission logs long buried. Wexler hadn't forgotten. He had history with Chuck, and now he had an opening. That night, Amara came home to find her father waiting outside watching the stars. "You did good," he said, not turning. "You saw it?" "I heard it in your voice." She stepped up beside him. "It's going to get louder, isn't it?" He nodded. "People don't like when truth walks into the room and doesn't apologize. Should we move again?" He looked at her, eyes narrowing slightly. "Not this time." "Why?" "Because they know who you are now," he said. "And it's time you show them what that means." She swallowed. "Even if they come after us?" Chuck smiled. "Slow and dangerous. They can try." 3 days passed. Not quiet days, never that. But days filled with a new rhythm, as if the world had shifted and everyone was pretending not to notice. Amara, now a name on trending lists and digital think pieces, went to school like normal. Except nothing was normal. Every classroom felt like a set. Every student an extra, and every word spoken to her carried the hollow tone of people trying not to say the one thing on their minds. Her dad is Chuck Norris, but for Amara, the whirlwind outside barely scratched the surface of the storm inside, because she could feel it, sense it like a pressure in her chest, the way animals can feel the weather change before a storm breaks. Chuck knew it too, but unlike his daughter, he'd seen this type of storm before. He'd been the cause of it, and now it was coming back. The moment came late at night in a flash. A security breach. Silent alarm. Chuck heard it before the system caught it. The unmistakable sound of a boot scraping the metal edge of their rooftop vent. He moved like lightning, silent and invisible, through the shadows of their house. Amara had already woken. She didn't know how, but her body jolted up like her soul knew she wasn't supposed to be asleep anymore. Chuck was already in position when the first figure dropped through the vent into the hallway. Dressed in matte black tactical gear, the man looked like a ghost designed in a lab. But he wasn't prepared for Chuck. In under 3 seconds, Chuck had disarmed him, knocked him unconscious, and caught him before he hit the floor. 2 more followed, trying to flank from opposite ends of the hallway, and Chuck took one down with a spin kick that hit so hard the drywall cracked. The other froze mid-lunge when he saw who he was up against. "Tell Wexler," Chuck said coldly, "I'm not the man I used to be." The man blinked in confusion, until Chuck finished the sentence. "I'm worse." Amara stood at the top of the stairs, barefoot, hoodie slightly twisted from sleep, eyes wide but steady. "You okay, kid?" Chuck asked. She nodded slowly. "Was this about me?" He didn't lie. Yes, the desert was quiet in the days that followed, like the world itself was holding its breath, unsure what to do now that the truth had been set loose. Amara sat at the edge of a sun-baked cliff outside their Mojave safe house, staring out at a horizon that no longer looked like something she had to survive, but something she could shape. Chuck sat beside her, quiet, more weathered than before, yet lighter somehow, as if the weight of a decade's worth of secrets had finally been burned off under the desert sun. "You changed the game," he said. Amara didn't look at him, her voice steady. "No, I changed me." The world had finally learned what it meant to underestimate a black girl with power, with history, and with a name like Norris. And it would never forget again. After the fall of Wexler, the data leaks from his corrupted labs went public, sparking global investigations. Agencies from every continent scrambled to cover up their affiliations with Project Recurve. Amara's name was scrubbed from every list, but it was too late. The truth was out. She'd become something no system could control, a living legacy. Chuck offered her a choice: disappear into peace or step into the light. Amara chose neither. She chose the middle, the edge. She began moving in silence again, but now on her own terms. She found others like her. Kids hidden, discarded, experimented on. Some were scared, some were dangerous. All of them needed someone who understood. So she became that someone. She wasn't a superhero. She wasn't a soldier. She was something new. She was a myth in sneakers and a hoodie, part vigilante, part mentor, part storm. Governments whispered about sightings. A girl with untouchable reflexes, born from forbidden science and raised by the last living legend. Sometimes Chuck was there, sometimes he wasn't. He knew this was no longer his story. It was hers. He went back to the mountains eventually. His last act of fatherhood wasn't a fight or a kill or a lesson. It was stepping back, letting her lead. One night, as Amara dismantled a child trafficking ring in a remote part of Brazil, a woman approached her with tears in her eyes. Are you Chuck Norris's daughter?" she asked. Amara paused, smiled faintly. "No," she said. "I'm my own damn name." She walked off into the moonlight as rumors spread of a girl who didn't just survive the system, but destroyed it. People began calling her the Recurve, a nod to the project that tried to define her. In the arc, she bent back into justice. No cape, no catchphrase, just fury, focus, and freedom. The last time she spoke to her father, it was brief. He called from a satellite phone in the Rockies. "You still good?" he asked. "I'm better than good," she replied. "I'm real now." Chuck smiled silently and hung up. That night, a storm rolled over the Mojave, breaking months of heat. Somewhere far from the headlines,